All right. How's everybody doing? Hope you guys are doing very well. I'm Stephen Huskey, certified exit planner with Huskey Financial Group, and I've got my esteemed guest, Michael Thompson, also certified exit planner with the Thompson Planning Group. We're specialists in assisting small business owners and those in the medical field. For myself and Michael's been working with blue collar folks, logistics and construction and manufacturing companies for a long time. So some of the strategies that we're going to cover with you today have been used for decades in Fortune 50 companies, Fortune 500 companies, and we've adapted this for the privately held companies local to the Carolinas as well as across the country. Whoever needs our help, we're able to explain and educate on these programs. But today's subject is all around avoiding a turnover tsunami. So since 2020, U.S. companies across the country have really experienced a sharp decline in the amount of folks that stay on to their business and an increase in the amount of attrition that they've been experiencing. And so for business owners, specifically around losing a key employee that you've trained and cultivated a relationship with is always a downer. But did you know that it's something that it's also eating at your bottom line? Retaining key employees is important for morale and company culture, but it can actually be important for your business's cash flow as well. So it's estimated that employers in the United States are losing $1 trillion every year due to voluntary turnover. I don't know if you can count how many zeros that is, but that is a gargantuan amount of money. And that's a staggering sum for all of us. So below in our slides, which we'll go over, we'll look into how employee turnover can possibly cost this much and what employers can do to encourage their top performers to stick around for the long haul. Many business owners neglect to consider the true costs of losing a key employee, but it can be a pricey endeavor. Depending on the employee's experience level and role within the company, experts report that finding and training a replacement can cost anywhere from 6 months to 2 years of annual salary, oftentimes more than that. Some of those costs that I'm going to speak about here today are recruiting and hiring expenses, onboarding and training time, loss of productivity and engagement while that other person has left, interim time for the person filling in, sometimes taking on dual roles within the company, customer service errors, cultural impact, and loss of trade secrets and key customers. So I want to turn it over to Mike just for a few moments to kind of talk about his expertise in this area before we get into the slides today and how we can help share some secrets around retention planning for your best people.
Thanks, Stephen. Well, you mentioned a number of the costs, and there are many. We break it down in two ways. We find that there are direct costs, which are obvious, and then there's an awful lot of indirect costs too. When we lose a key employee, with a company, they've been there, anywhere over 5 years. There's a certain cultural impact to the company that's hard to really measure or quantify. But it's real. And if any business owners out there have experienced, I'm sure there are some out there in the audience that have lost someone special to the company, it takes a long time to get over that. I mean, the other employees are impacted by it. It's just a mess. And so when an employee leaves a company, a profitable, successful company, for what we would look back at as menial increases in salary, $5,000 a year more money, and they've been with the company for so long. It's just a real travesty to see that happen, and there's ways to prevent it. Candidly, we can fix that together. Stephen and I, we've been doing these plans for collectively almost 50 years. So we've got a lot of experience in this area. And it's not just black and white, really. There's a lot of psychological components that go into building out one of these strategies and plan designs. We get to know the company very well. We get to know the employees, fortunately, the key employees, which has been a real thrill over the years. Get to know these people. It's amazing how many commonalities they have, how similar all the key people are that we have as participants in these plans. But it's over and beyond. I think Stephen may go over this in a minute, so I hope I don't get redundant, but group benefits is not what we're talking about. 401k is not what we're talking about. The type of things that we build and design are Fortune 2000, Fortune 500 style compensation plans that we simply customize for the closely held business. So it's exactly the same plans. They're very unique. I would say 99 times out of 100 when we meet a new business, they've never seen these plan designs. It's that rare. I don't know why. I can't explain it. It's been around since the 60s, but we just don't see it in a closely held space. A lot of business owners just don't know what they can do. These things are more tax favored than the 401k plan. We can be completely selective with who gets in the plan. So let me say that again, because that's gonna resonate with some folks. Well, wait a minute. I thought if you did it for one person, it was tax favored. You had to do it for everybody, and that's true under qualified plan rules.
Correct.
These rules doesn't exist. So we can be more selective. We can choose who goes into the plan, and there are no funding limits. So the ability to be able to build these things and customize them to a certain company, highly effective at preventing somebody from leaving, heaven forbid, in the dark of night, where you come in one Wednesday morning and the guy's office is empty. That's a terrible thing to have to go through if you've ever experienced it. We can fix that.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that, man. So I'm going to go through all the slides here. Again, this is called Avoid a Turnover Tsunami. These are actionable employee retention strategies that every business owner should know, no matter the size of the business. My phone number is listed below, that 843-714-3387. You can also reach me at steven@huskyfinancial.com, and Michael and I can always respond to any questions as well in the StreamYard chat. But thank you again for attending and allowing us to share our education and knowledge with all of you. So part one, talking about retention planning. Michael touched on this earlier. There are quite a few different retention strategies that don't work. And the first one is around performance. Performance incentive plans are specifically designed to shape employee behavior over a shorter period of time, and they don't necessarily retain. Once they get that small performance bonus or whatever it is that you're going to provide for them, they may have already had one foot out the door. And so we need something that is a longer term type of incentive strategy, or some type of deferred compensation model, which we'll get into. And the second one is the retention plans, because a lot of the ones that are performance-based are short-term. The long-term ones are the ones that really make the big difference in the employee attrition lowering over time. And so if we're designed to keep the employee from willfully leaving the company, figure out, if you're interested in exiting your business at some point, if you're in your 40s or 50s and you're like 5 to 7 years out, you can actually mix and match your exit arrangement as well as a retention strategy with your key people. So those are some things that we'll touch on as well. Great benefits like 401ks, life and disability insurance, unlimited PTO, all of those things attract great people to your organization, but you need a separate plan to keep those great people there for a long and extended period of time. So those small, those attraction tools really only keep people around for 12 months on average. So what are the characteristics of retention? What separates benefits that retain from traditional benefits that we hear a lot in the marketplace? Retention-focused benefits provide unique characteristics, and unlike most, and should incorporate all the following. The very first one is extremely important. It's got to be deferred to a specific time in the future. People will stay on with you and your company for a bonus, a large commission, or even a large sum of cash. The sooner that benefit vests, the easier it is for them to leave. So ideally, the benefit should be cliff vested when the employee receives more of the benefit, the longer that they stay on with you and your company. The second one, also extremely important. You can't just provide something that you think the employee is going to want themselves. You have to have a deep, sometimes philosophical conversation with your employees, because everyone has unique things they'd like to accomplish within their life, within their family, within their own businesses. And so it's never a good enough reason to just go to them and say, I didn't want you to leave. That's too far gone at that point. The best plans that we help design address an emotional milestone that is extremely important to that individual in your company, the spouse or the kids of that employee. And that could include retirement, debt payoff, college funding for employees with young children. Could be taking that 25-year anniversary trip with their spouse because their honeymoon wasn't exactly the way they wanted it. I mean, there's a ton of different things that are important, but that's a conversation that you need to have with that key employee or with the group. And finally, it has to be simple enough to understand that the employee can get that plan delivered verbally to the spouse and they understand it well. If it's not simple enough for the employee or the employee's spouse to understand, then it doesn't feel real. Plus, another added value to that is that if the employee is going to the spouse and saying, hey, I'm thinking about leaving, XYZ company, the spouse is going to give them a swift kick in the behind and say, hey, we're having our kids' college paid for in 5 years. You better not leave. So those good retention plans have a promise to pay if you stay. And the best retention plans have a promise to pay if you stay, but they will also pay no matter what, including if you get hurt or sick along the way, or if you die too soon, the family members can still receive that payout that you promised as the employer. So anything you'd like to add on to that, Mike?
Just kind of touching back on some of the impact if we do lose somebody. There's something what we call the domino syndrome, where if one key employee leaves a company, let's say you got 50 employees, and one key person leaves, unfortunately, it wouldn't be a surprise to have another one leave in the next 2 months or so. It's a domino effect. There's concern among the rank and file. There's concern certainly among the key people. And that's just another cost. It's hard to quantify, but that was one thing I wanted to mention before we got too far away from it. Some companies don't ever recover from losing somebody that's really key. So the vesting, absolutely, the vesting strategies are the glue of a reward plan. I would say the psychological aspect of this stuff, when we're talking to business owners, and I hope we are, the audience is business owners, retention planning sounds great. We want to retain our key people. But when you're talking to the employee themselves, nobody wants to be retained. We've learned this over the years. So we would prefer to call, and the conversations we have with key employees are, this is a reward plan to recognize your efforts and value the company. One of the things I mentioned, commonalities, key employees know they're key. I think we all know that. But they all want to be recognized in some way, not necessarily on stage or trophies or anything. I mean, it just depends on the person, but they do want to be recognized. And if they're not recognized to the level that they need, and it is a need, then they're susceptible to leave. So, Stephen's dead on with the emotional milestone piece. When we can connect that to an employee, there's much, much less chance. I can guarantee you this, you'll have a conversation before they leave in the dead of night at a minimum.
Yeah.
And that gives you a chance to fix whatever's wrong. Certainly $5,000 a year is not enough to lose a key employee. The cost of putting these plans in place too, by the way, is extremely low relative to what it costs if you lose them.
Another point I would like for you to make as well is we can be an advocate for the company. So if you set up a plan with us to help retain your best employees, and the employees are well aware of how this works, but they're 4 or 5 years removed from the first conversation with us, guess who they're going to call before they make the decision to leave the company? They're going to call Mike or myself and say, hey, I know I have this benefit out there. Can you tell me more about that? And we can talk to them about it. We can figure out what's going on, and we can inadvertently get back with you, the employer, and say, hey, we had a conversation with this person. You might want to speak with them as well.
That's a great point.
So let's look at this in action, right? We've got two folks. We've got Mrs. Jane Key. She's the vice president of operations of this fictional company. And we've got Mr. John Key. He's the vice president of sales. So in this scenario for Jane, she's a married 55-year-old female who's planning for retirement. Jane will receive $35,000 per year for 5 years, starting at the age of 65. It's allowing her to defer and receive maximum Social Security retirement benefits. So for someone who's very interested in having the most successful and profitable retirement possible, you can give her the ability to defer Social Security payments because they're having that income replaced with your benefit that you've provided for them. So if Jane is remaining with the company for 10 years and achieved a declared profit margin benchmark, they have then been rewarded and incentivized to stay, and then they get a payout over a number of years as well. So the good news is you can defer it out for 10 years, but then you can separate those payments over a few years as well, so it's not such a cash drag on the company. So you can figure out how that works. In a second scenario, I've got John here. He's a married 35-year-old male with 2 toddler children, kind of resembles me there. John will receive $50,000 per year for each child over a 4-year period to help cover education costs. That's huge. If my employer, if I had one, came to me and said, hey, we'll give you this, then you bet I'd stay on. But in order for him to get it, he must remain with the company for 12 years, including over that 4-year payout. So you've retained that person for 16 years, and then they receive the entire benefit. Probably a good idea to recognize that you'll be retaining that person for a longer period after the 4-year payout as well, because you treated their family so well.
Yeah, and if I can jump in there, Stephen, and add to it, those are tremendously effective retention strategies. One thing I'll add is when that's announced, when that's awarded to the employee, in other words, they're given in the information of what the company's about to do for them, whatever the vesting period is, once the plan's implemented, and we do accrue money and set aside the funding for these plans. That's a whole secondary conversation on how we do that. But these plans are technically, from a definition standpoint, unfunded, but the company is actually setting aside annually a dollar amount, proceeds amount that will at least satisfy a large percentage of that future promise liability. But imagine this: if you've got the scenario 2 there, and this guy's 4 years away from his first child going to college, 48 months, 36 months, let's say, he's fulfilled most of the vesting period. The likelihood of an employee leaving with 3 more years of vesting on a 10 or 12, 15-year vest, it would be unheard of for an employee in that position to actually leave the company. It would have to be a really bad situation, and we would not wish that on anybody. But hopefully it would be one of those really positive experiences where they're fired up and excited about it. Productivity for the companies, we can measure that. I've got a couple of case studies we'll go over later where we can definitively see dramatic productivity numbers. It's a sales company, so it's easier to measure. But anyway, I would just add that the closer we get, the sooner we start a plan with a company, the sooner we're going to get close to the vesting period. And when we're inside 3 or 4 years of the vesting award, they're not leaving. They're just not.
Well, let me ask you this question, Mike, for the audience. Let's say they're within 3 years of getting their benefit, and they either decide to retire prematurely or they want to leave this company for another one. What happens to the benefit?
That's a great question. So there's agreements that go along with these plan designs. They're all customized. The plans are completely flexible. We can do lots and lots of different things. But along with that, whatever the mathematics of it are, we also back that up for both parties to protect the business, to protect the employee, with legal documents and agreements that will address triggering events. A triggering event would be if the person gets terminated for cause just because their productivity went down the tubes and they're not doing the job they were doing, the company's not obligated to keep them on board. They can terminate that person for cause. That would disqualify them from that future benefit. Let's say another scenario where a spouse has a parent in California and we live in North Carolina, and they have to move to California. That's a triggering event that would keep the person from staying there the whole vesting period. But the business owner has an option in the agreement to say if something like that happens, we meet halfway. There's some kind of conclusion that would be more positive than just not awarding anything. The company is in a position with most all of these plans. It can vary a little bit, but almost every plan we build, if it doesn't go as planned, the company's going to get full cost recovery. So we want to have those dollars that have been set aside. If it doesn't work out and an employee actually does leave you for a competitor, heaven forbid, that's the worst scenario, then we want the company to be in a position where they retain everything. The employee walks away from everything.
So you're saying that the employer gets remuneration, especially if the employee leaves, they get to keep that benefit. They can retitle it, they can do whatever, and they could use it for someone else, or they can take the cash and walk.
That's right. It actually turns into the positive spin on that is that it actually turns into, let's say it's a 4 or 5 year plan. been in place for 4 or 5 years, we can recruit to that. So when we have to go out and find a replacement for that person, we've got a 4 or 5 year, what we would call a seasoned plan already in place. We could plug them right in there.
Got it. Thanks for sharing, man. So let's go over part 2. This is around protection. So we're going to go into the pitfalls of one of the benefits that a lot of employers provide, which is group long-term disability. It does provide an excellent foundation of coverage, yet this particular product was never designed to fully protect the income of employees that add the most value. It's more of a rank and file benefit, and they really enjoy it. But the certain pitfalls that remain unknown, that's not able to be quantified until an employee makes a claim. So only when they do they discover the contractual details that place significant limitations on their much needed disability benefit. And we'll go into reverse discrimination in just a second around that, but let's talk about how this benefit is better for rank and file employees, more so than your key employee group. So it's taxable income. If the employer receives a benefit today for creating a deduction in their income by writing the premiums for the client or for the employee, the premiums paid by the organization with pre-tax dollars, then that monthly benefit is entirely taxable for that employee. So they're expecting 60% of their pay. They're only going to get maybe 40% of it. That's a huge change for them. Reverse discrimination, something I mentioned earlier. Employer-sponsored group long-term disability insurance benefits are typically capped at a monthly income replacement amount far lower than most top employees. And as a result, the more you earn, the less of that income is actually protected. In addition, a lot of these group benefits do not provide a COLA rider on it, which means cost of living adjustment over time. So if they're on this benefit for a number of years, they're making the same dollar amount from the benefits company, and it's eroding their purchasing power due to the power of inflation and how that works. So nobody wants that. Let's go over the reduced benefit. So many are surprised to find that benefits received from outside programs like Social Security or workers' compensation will reduce the amount of monthly benefit from their insurance company dollar for dollar. That's why you see a lot of folks who are on disability stay on disability for a longer period of time, because should they go get a new taxable wage somewhere else, it reduces the benefit that they can sit home and receive. It's piecemeal as well. So a lot of these policies will only cover basic wages and salary calculated by a formula. And a significant portion of a lot of these companies, like sales companies, tech companies, they receive a lot of their income from overtime, bonuses, commissions, and a lot of retirement contributions are not accounted for as well. So they're exposed to a tremendous amount of loss. And I think the most important part, honestly, of a long-term disability policy is their definition, the company's definition of what a disability is. So I work with a lot of physicians. So I used physicians in this example, and they're very skilled, highly skilled employees. However, the policies through their group will not honor that skill or specialty. In other words, if they're able to perform the duties of any other occupation, they're not considered disabled by definition. And so the definition of true own occupation is an extremely important thing to understand around this particular product. That's why you see a lot of highly skilled employees go get their own supplemental coverages that they can port with them wherever they go. They're underwritten individually for them. They get to choose their own riders. They get to choose what's important to them. They can replace retirement savings plans. They can get a broader amount of income. So those are some things to consider as a possible benefit. So let's talk about unintentional reverse discrimination a little bit more and show you kind of how that math works. So a lot of these companies provide group benefits, but there's a cap on the amount of money that they're able to receive. So this leaves these key employees significantly underinsured. Just a few statistics around disability. If you don't mind, Mike, I'll go into this.
Yeah.
1 in 4 people, let's say that there's you and me, Mike, and then a couple others in here as well. 1 in 4 have some type of long-term disability prior to reaching age 65. Of those 25% of people, 9 out of 10 of those cases are health-related disabilities, and only 1 out of 10 is injury-related. So you've got a much higher chance of having some significant health issue that keeps you out of work for a while. And the most commonly presented claims to insurance companies for a long-term disability is muscular and skeletal, mental health issues, and cancer is one of them as well. So you never can tell if it's hereditary or not. You may end up getting it. Hopefully you don't, but those are some of the reasons why disability claims are put in. So in this example, a GLTD plan that covers 60% of salary to a maximum of $10,000 per month will cover 60% of salary only for employees earning $200,000 or less. And the benefit cap means a physician earning $250,000 will only have coverage for 48%. And that's prior to any taxes being taken out if they're receiving the benefit. And that if there is a physician earning $350,000, they only have 34% of their wages covered. Anybody earning over $450,000, only a quarter of their earnings are covered. So you can see here different salary ranges, different job titles and specialties. The blue here is what's uncovered. So they have a huge advantage to go out and get their own policy, or you can provide them as the employer as a really good benefit to keep them on. And a lot of times you can actually make these portable for these employees as well. So something to consider if you're offering group benefits.
I would jump in there too, Stephen, and mention, with the changes in the disability insurance market, we can actually go into a firm, a company like the owners that we're maybe talking to, with guarantee issue products where if we've got a number of people that fall into that third or fourth category, being able to get that type of coverage without having to go through underwriting, because it is a group executive level, obviously from the incomes, executive level arrangement. I'm hesitant to say benefit plans because we don't want it to fall into the category of group disability. This would be a carve out for the upper income folks. That's who we normally deal with. And just for fun, I did the math on it. At a $250,000 level income, typically the cap on the group plan is $6,000 a month. So just to put some real numbers to it, $6,000 a month. And to Stephen's point, that's taxable. So the net of that at 28% is $4,320 a month. So that $250,000 employee gets disabled. It's a bad thing. He's used to bringing home $15,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
And so from $15,000 to $4,300 on top of having to buy ramps to get into the house and all. I mean, it's a terrible conversation to have to talk about how that looks, but it's important to note. So that's a large gap. That's a life-changing gap of lost income. And in my world, where I'm mostly doing retention reward plans, here's another psychological component that's hard to quantify. It only takes one person in a company to go through that before everybody else leaves, unless it's fixed. So once that gap is exposed, unfortunately, by the disability of an employee in a company, it damages the culture of the company. The company has to really get on defense, and if they don't fix the gap, then they're going to lose a lot of key employees. That's our main goal.
So let's help your top physicians or key employees in your business, whichever industry that it's in, bridge that gap. So a supplemental plan that works in conjunction with your already presented group benefits or arrangements to protect more of your employees' income from the impact of disability. A supplemental protection plan is an important benefit, specifically for those highly compensated employees who may not have the proper amount of replacement coverage for their larger salaries, incentive compensation, or retirement contributions through your existing plan. So this can help you fill the gap, covering up to the allowed amount of 75% of total gross insurable income. And so you can actually offer staggered amounts for each employee's particular salary, because as we know, the group benefits don't cover those commissions and bonuses, and these should provide the right amount of money. The remaining 25% that's uncovered, hopefully they're not paying as much in taxes, and they're not needing the specific benefits that they were paying for prior to that. So they can live really well off of 75% of their wages versus only the 28 or so that the other person was receiving. So your physicians, again, this is speaking to a lot of different companies, but the physicians that I wrote this for have complex financial needs, and looking at their group benefits package for their primary protection needs. It's not all just about protecting their life and health. This is one thing that you can do to add value. They're looking to protect their income, and physicians are savvy about the group coverage and the coverage gap. And that's why a lot of folks may leave. They're looking for better benefits. And so when considering employment prospects, they're looking for benefit enhancements that matter, such as those that recognize their need for additional income protection. So advantages for your organization as the employer, what's in it for you, right? So it helps you attract, retain, and reward those employees. Those plans are voluntary and they are sponsored by your organization without any financial obligation. Paid coverages for select employees. Any premiums that you're offering to pay for are tax deductible as a business expense. We have a turnkey process that we put folks through to make it easy for them. And we have customized communications, which makes implementation easy as well. There's flexible funding and billing options for this particular benefit, and there's seamless end-to-end case administration, and we act as liaisons for that. Advantages for your employees. Purchased under the most favorable terms. There's easy application process. There's no medical exams. Just 3 easy yes or no questions to answer. I like to keep it simple. Coverage is individually owned, customized, and portable. They wanted to take it somewhere they could. And an annual renewal process enables coverage to grow with the employee's income. They can continue to see how their income has grown, and if they need more, they can get it. Coverage for more types of income covers bonus, incentive, retirement contributions, and there are also permanent premium discounts. If a large number of folks within your organization tag onto this benefit, you get discounts on the premium in most cases. All right, the education piece, and then I'll let Mike do a couple case studies for about 5 minutes, and then we'll send off. But let's go into the education piece that we can help provide.
Hey, Stephen, can I jump in? Can I, before we get off of the
certainly
the gap conversation? It's also I think important to note that not just on a disability scenario, but from a 401k contribution level, if you've got, the upper income numbers that we were just looking at, and just use another example, a $250,000 employee, the ideal savings rate, most financial planners would agree, is 20% of your earnings. If you save 20% of your earnings, you should be good to go for retirement pretty much. There's a lot of numbers that go into that, but that's just a general rule of thumb. So 20% is a savings rate that we target with all of our individual clients. It's hard to do, but at 20%, that's $50,000 a year that person at $250 a year would be ideally putting away somewhere. I looked at the limits yesterday, and including profit sharing plan 401ks, you could go up to $30,000 a year, and then you're running into things, you start bumping into testing issues where the employee comes to you and says, "Why did I get this letter? They're sending me a check back for my 401k contribution." Well, they've hit the limit. And they will hit the limit at a 250 and up income. Yep. So the other retention plans that we discussed earlier, which included a vesting award or bonus out into the future, that's what it is. It's a significant bonus in many cases. That works really well to fill that gap. I just wanted to add that in there, Stephen.
Appreciate that, man. Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of great, there's some really cool stuff that we do with these employers to help them save more for their futures. Creating individualized pensions is one of them, and they can actually give that capability to their key employees as well to save more above and beyond their 401k or profit sharing plans. So that's a good point. Let's go into the financially stressed and how they underperform in your company. So we need to help alleviate stress for our employees so they become the most productive individuals within your company. So as an employer, your employees are really looking to you for help on managing their overall financial wellness. I don't know about you, Mike, but I don't like sitting at the dinner table with my wife and discussing my life insurance policies or, going over our budget. Like, nobody likes to do that. So they take that stuff with them to work, unfortunately, and that stress boils over into underperformance. So since that is directly correlated with your engagement and commitment to your company, a lot of traditional employee benefit programs, they can provide a fast start in building a solid foundation for your employees' personal finances. But yet relying solely on these programs really leaves a lot of the financial world unbalanced and unattended, unaccounted for, and really they're not knowledgeable about what's out there. So it can have a really big triple effect in their performance and your retention. Employees are also faced with the ongoing challenge of planning and solving complex financial issues all on their own. So there's a better way for you to help alleviate stress from home and not bringing that to work. and uncovering the myriad items that they're considering in their own minds as they go through their day. We have a program called Wealth Steps. So it's got a lot of benefits. We cover all the different benefits they have in their office with you, go over those with them. We also go over financial planning. Everyone's got a dream and they all want to make it a reality. So we've got folks that we can send into the office and talk to your employees. They can educate them around the process that we bring folks through, the education that we provide. We never pitch products. We don't sell anything. We're there just to understand the many needs of your employees and help them get closer to their goals. So basically, it's essential personal finance concept conversation that we have with them. And we look at everything on a balance sheet perspective. As a business owner, you know how you live and die by your own balance sheet. We can also provide a simple personalized balance sheet for your individual employees and help them grow it as they get ready for retirement. So it helps them understand different financial concepts, simple logic, financial decisions that can help bridge the gap between a future of clarity, confidence, and security and where they might be today. Live workshops, website experience, and working with an individual financial professional that is well-versed in what they need. So quick overview, and then I'll let Mike have 5 minutes to go over some case studies. Retention. You can be discriminatory or selective with who you choose for your retention strategies. They're an employer-sponsored plan designed specifically to retain your top talent, translate that value to what you see as their role in your organization and reward them for it. Plan assets are corporately owned until the employee is fully vested and can be designed for full cost recapture once those benefits are paid to the key employee. So it's really not going to be much of a cash flow issue for you to implement these. It's really it's an efficient way for you to spend your cash flow and reduce the amount of attrition costs that your company may have been subject to prior to that. These benefits are also very simple and easily understood. They're financially substantial for the person you're trying to retain. The protection piece. You can also have select employees that you implement this with. An employer-sponsored disability benefit, a group benefit, is not going to be enough for your key employees. So we have to find how to bridge that gap for them. The much desired benefit for employees with unique occupations, it eliminates reverse discrimination with standalone group policies and policies that they have above and beyond that are permanently discounted and issued with no medical exams. And we'll remove that biggest obstacle from that equation, which is underwriting. You know, we're in that world ourselves, Mike. I think you can understand that it's the bane of our existence as financial planners, as underwriting, but it's a necessary evil. An employee's income is completely protected with full policy ownership, containing unique contract language for them as an employee, permanent discounts and limited underwriting. The third concept around this benefit executive review is employer-sponsored financial education programs that gives employees access to real financial advice that's comprehensive, consultative, and it's holistic. Financially stressed employees underperform historically. So if your employees are looking to you to help manage their wealth and understand all about their finances personally, our program gives those employees what they really need. Solid advice, supports them at work so that they are more supported at home. And this program also supports other existing benefits like 401k participation. If you would like for them to implement more money of their own into 401ks, we could help bridge the gap between the understanding of how that works and actually putting the money aside and contributing to it. So we have the on-site live workshops, personalized website experience, and access to a licensed financial professional. So I believe comes to the end of our presentation. And I will let you go ahead, Mike, and share some excellent case studies for us today.
That's great. So there's a couple of case studies that we pulled. These are fairly recent, I'd say within the last 15 months that were implemented. Different type of companies. We work with all types of companies. Right now, we find that construction industry is really dealing with a lot of retention issues. Field supervisors are leaving, from one company to another for modest increases in pay. And it's a problem. If you ask any business owner that has a construction company, have you lost anybody in the last year or two? They'll give you a spirited answer because it's frustrating for them and they don't know what to do about it. So IT companies are the same way right now. But we work with all types of companies, and these things can be customized There's a lot of, as mentioned earlier, there's a lot of flexibility. We had one case. It was actually it was a manufacturing company. They built ATM machines. Never seen the inside of an ATM machine. It's pretty cool. But they've got a sales team, a national sales team that they wanted to somehow or another. Their big objective was, how can we incentivize these guys to be more productive on the sales side? And so what we built was a plan where the sales folks who were hitting a certain level of productivity, there were 12 salespeople in the company, and 5 of them were doing production at a level that the company felt like they wanted to reward. So they wanted to make that the target. So for those 5 people, the first year contribution into the plan was 10% of what they made last year. So a pretty nice contribution. This is not pulling bonuses they were already getting away. It's important to note, this is not a plan where we reallocate or redirect existing bonuses. I would recommend highly against that. So they were starting a new plan, and they looked at it as, well, 10% of what they're earning, that means our sales volume is where it needs to be. It's all relevant and relative, I should say. We don't mind putting away 10% if they're hitting this level of productivity. So we said, okay, well, that'll be the floor level. So how can we incentivize the others to get on board? Well, that should be enough to get them at least into the qualifying status. But how do we move the guy in grid 1? We built out 5 productivity grids based on sales volume. So they're doing the minimum, which is the 5, and that's satisfactory performance. If they go to the next level based on sales volume for that year, they would go into the first grid, and that would increase their contribution level that the company's funding by another 10%. And we did 5 grids. So that's 10% to get in of last year's salary. Theoretically, nobody hit the 5th grid yet. I'd have to check for last year. This plan's been in place a couple of years now. But nobody's hit the 5th grid as far as I know. But if they did, that would be a 60%. Remember, contribution, they don't get the bonus right away. It goes into a deferred compensation arrangement. But the productivity incentive is there. So when somebody does ring the bell at that 60% mark, let's just say they made $200,000 last year. That's a big bonus, relatively speaking. Will that person leave the company? We get a vesting period on this plan, so they're not leaving. That's a very rich, incentive-based way that the company can, again, the money's there because the sales volume's there. That makes it really easy for the company. And the company's benefiting from it too, by a long shot based on margins. But anyway, so that was a pretty creative one. They had actually an 8-year vesting period on that. We normally will put the vesting period anywhere between 7 and 10 years. We can have flexibility on that. The shorter the vesting period, the less we feel the company's getting for what they're funding. We'd like to have them at least get 8 years of retention. We don't go past 10 though, because if you tell a 39-year-old sales guy, if you stay till 65, we're going to give you that doesn't mean anything to them. It's too far out. So 8 to 10 years is ideal, we find, and you can always get to the 6th or 7th year, and we can sweeten the deal and push out, the award even further, or pay it out and start another one. But anyway, it does get a solid retention of 8 or 10 years. So that's one case.
Yeah, let's do one more high level case study, and then we'll send everybody off.
All right. Here's an interesting one. So this electrical contracting company, these guys wanted to sell the company. They said inside of 8 years, and they had a handful of folks that they felt like were key to the company, that if a third party were coming in to buy the construction company, they felt like these key people needed to be in the company. If they lost those people during a transition of ownership, they felt like not many people would want to buy the company. So what we did, we put a stay bonus in place for those 8 key employees, that the vesting period, we had it set up at 10 years. And so it stayed with the company for the 8 years, and then the company sells. Well, we wanted to have some incentive for those folks to stick around through the transition to the new ownership. So they're only 2 years out from their vesting period on a significant bonus. The mathematics behind that strategy are, For every dollar we spend on that stay bonus to keep those 8 people, the company's going to sell for $5 more for every dollar we spend. So the company gets it back. The sellers of the company, I should say, profit from that, and it makes the transition much smoother. That's just another example of how creative we can be with these things.
So you're saying that this is not limited to just physicians or construction companies or electricians or ATM production machines. We can use these really in a very
across the board. People ask me all the time. I get the question all the time. What's your ideal client? And my answer is any successful business, because any successful business has key employees. Now it might be the owner. We don't know, as small as that can be. It could be the owner, but and there's plans for those guys too. But typically, if it's a successful company that's got some traction and they're doing well, we know there's somebody driving that bottom line, and it's always a relevant conversation because it's the second biggest concern business owners have, right behind cash flow. The second one on the list is losing key employees, especially to competitors, like in the construction market. That gets them it stirs them up a lot. They don't like it.
It does. It fires them up.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, thank you for joining me today, for helping all these folks understand how to avoid a turnover tsunami. And if anyone has any questions, you can reach out to me at steven.huskey@cplanning.com. My other email is steven@huskeyfinancial.com. And you can reach out to Mike at mthompson@cplanning.com as well. Looking forward to hearing some questions from you all via email. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Stephen.